Welcome back, Book Talk Explorers, to another exciting episode of Dragons and Spaceships. I, of course, am your host, Brandi, and today we are diving back into the chilling psychological horror world of Tatiana Schlote. This is my second time interviewing Tatiana, and I'm so excited because she's here to talk about her latest novel, The Mean Ones, which follows Sadie, a 29-year-old who is still haunted by the trauma of witnessing her best friend's brutal death as a child. This story blends psychological horror and folk horror, and it's set in a secluded cabin where eerie voices, unsettling visions, and a dark past comes together to create a terrifying but deeply human story about trauma, survival, and confronting what lurks in both the world and the mind. So settle in because this episode is full of suspense, insight, and behind-the-scenes secrets from the mind of one of contemporary horror's most captivating authors. But before we get into the interview, let's give our listeners a quick overview of The Mean Ones. Sadie, formerly known as Sabrina, is a young woman still grappling with the trauma of witnessing her best friends murdered years ago. She's now a physical therapist assistant, trying to live a normal life, but when she and her partner take a couple's trip to a secluded cabin, the past comes rushing back, eerie voices, shadowy figures, and mysterious visions that blur the lines between reality and imagination. It's a psychological folk horror story exploring PTSD, trauma, and the human need to face our fears head on. And while it's terrifying in parts, it's also deeply emotional and character-driven, giving readers both suspense and empathy as Sadie navigates her world. And now I'm thrilled to welcome back Tatiana Schlote. We are thrilled to welcome back Tatiana Schlote. Thank you for joining me again. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Brandi?
I'm doing so good. Thank you so much for coming back. I'm so excited to talk about this new book that you just wrote and hear all about the creative behind the scenes and everything.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be back and chatting with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Okay, so let's dive right in. For listeners who haven't picked up The Mean Ones yet, can you give us a quick snapshot of the story and what inspired you to explore themes of trauma and identity through Sadie?
Yeah, so The Mean Ones is a dual timeline folk horror that takes place in 2023 in our present timeline and in 2006 in our past timeline when Sadie survived a cult sacrifice at summer camp. Very much inspired by Midsummer and Yellow Jackets. And so when I was working on the concept for this book, I was watching Midsummer a lot, one of my favorite movies, and The Ritual. And I was thinking about how in those fantastic stories, we see the protagonist dealing with the cult sacrifice in real time. Like it's their first time encountering this cult as we, the viewer, the reader, were encountering it for the first time. And I was speaking, what about Aster?
Yeah.
What is it like for these side characters who are sacrificed 20 years after the fact? So I'm very interested in trauma as, you know, the ripple of the past. And so, yeah, I wanted to tell a story about a protagonist who had dealt with it in the past and that was coming back to haunt her. And she's under this immense pressure to be normal. And I think the funny thing about Sadie is that she can almost save herself several times throughout the book if she just says no and just gives up her attachment to being normal.
Yeah.
But I like that she's so flawed and so attached to being this people pleaser. And, you know, that's the story. That's the thing she has to learn to overcome. But yes, that's what I was thinking when I was exploring these things.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Sadie's such a complex, amazing character, and I'm just so excited for readers to dive into this one as well. Well, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about Sadie. So Sadie's past is both terrifying and heartbreaking. What challenges did you face in balancing the horror elements with her psychological journey, especially the PTSD aspects?
Yeah. So Sadie is actually pulled a lot for me. So I've dealt with PTSD myself. Actually, when I was 15, my dad kidnapped me. It sounds very dramatic. He had sent me to live with other relatives after we got into this huge fight. And then he changed his mind when I'd started the legal process to get out of his custody. And so he came and took me physically. And actually, that worked out for me because that sort of act was what I needed to prove judge that I should not be in his custody. So it was really tragic, but it worked out. But for years after that, I dealt with like a lot of spiraling over what would have happened if that just like gone any different way, and just a lot of stress and just like triggers around like the type of car that he arrived in, and just I experienced, that like full body physical reaction.
Absolutely.
And when I was dealing with the story player out there, it was like, what if the world changed for the character? Like not just internally, but like externally, the PTSD triggered a sort of like Silent Hill like transformation.
Yeah.
Um, and I was also had just gotten out of the nonfiction writing program at Iowa, so I've been writing a lot of memoir. I've been writing about this dad thing for like 3 years, so it felt really easy actually to pull a lot of the writing about feelings into this book.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing that you can pull from experience and those deep emotions and all the psychological things I'm sure you went through and put it through your character. And that's so interesting to hear. I'm sorry that happened to you, but what amazing writing came out from that creative aspect too.
It's really cathartic.
Yeah.
And a lot of my own trauma is like inherently bonded to the writing that I do. So it's a great outlet for me.
Absolutely. I would imagine so. Well, lucky for us, we get to read all of that creative aspect from you. So let's talk about the cabin. The cabin itself almost feels like a character in the story. How did you approach creating an environment that was both isolating and haunting for Sadie?
I, again, was thinking about my favorite horror movies, and The Evil Dead came to mind, Evil Dead 2, The Cabin, Cabin in the Woods. I love meta horror, and so I'm hyper aware of The Cabin as a common horror setting. And that's part of what I love about horror is we have these familiar tropes that we can keep playing with and like kind of wink at the reader that like we know it's another cabin. But I love the claustrophobic feeling of the cabin the girls are in. So in the book, they're at cabin 10, they're way out, isolated, and Sabrina's trapped with her two girlfriends, but they're this mean girl trio friendship. Which I was a part of in middle school also. So I'm pulling from that. So I just thought that claustrophobic room was right for the horror setting. And I did not enjoy summer camp. I remember it being really hot and miserable. And like, why would anyone do this? I've never grown to like camping. And it was fun to play with the kind of classic cliche, dingy, death inviting camp. I think Sadie calls it. Yeah. From the 2010 one, and the like modern Airbnb cabin in the present timeline, since that's a bit more unexpected.
For sure. Well, that's so fun. That is one of my favorite tropes is like the whole cabin feel. And my husband grew up in Oregon, and so he's always like, "Oh, I just like want to move out in the middle of nowhere." I'm like, "No, that's where bad things happen." He's like, "No, actually, it doesn't." Okay, so many readers love your debut, Such Lovely Skin. How did your approach to writing horror evolve from that book to The Mean Ones? And were there any specific influences or inspirations that shaped this story for you?
After Such Lovely Skin, I wanted to write something that wasn't so steeped in grief and forgiveness. There is still some grief and, guilt and trauma in Mean Ones, but it's very muted. I was much more interested in the unexpected reactions. So, when like that tragedy happens, people always come out and they're like, "Oh, she was so great. She was a light in the room." And I was like, what if my character is the person who's like, actually, she got what she deserved?
Yeah.
And so I was playing around with like, I just feel this book to be grittier and deal with those like ugly, selfish, mean girl feelings, and also kind of coming of age as an adult. As I know it is adults, but Sagi's still very repressed in many ways because of her trauma, and she's almost 30 and like still haven't learned to find the voice. And I do love, a badass female protagonist. I'm all for it. But sometimes I do feel frustrated, like, how did this character get here?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't born like a super confident, independent woman. I had to like flounder through some bad relationships and figure out who I was before I learned what I wanted and how I wanted to be treated. And so I was very interested in telling the story of getting through that evolution and like all the shit women often deal with to figure out who they are.
I'm curious, were there any scenes that were particularly challenging or rewarding to write and ones that really pushed you creatively, maybe?
Yeah, the cabin invasion scene is definitely one of my favorites. I think that's a little bit past the halfway point, maybe 2/3, but then It's not a spoiler. We know that Alia Blakely died. So this is the scene where we finally learn how they died that night and exactly how it went down. That one was a lot of fun. It was sort of my reward for getting to that point in the book because I've been struggling with the intricate plotting of switching the timelines at the right point and like putting all the scenes in place to pull the story off. So that was a ton of fun. And the ending was really rewarding. And the ending seems to be a lot of readers' favorite parts. And that was my favorite part too. And definitely one of the greatest rewards and biggest challenges of writing this book. So I outlined all backstories and I knew how I wanted this book to end before I even started writing. And I vividly remember like halfway through the book, like this ending is too ambitious. Like just no way. It's not going to come together. But I pushed through and it worked.
Amazing. It really does work. I totally agree, and I love the ending. I'm so excited to hear what all the feedback is with everything, and so far people are seeming to really love it too. So, well, looking ahead, you have What Feeds Below slated for fall of 2026. Can you share a little bit about what readers can expect from this next project, how it connects or differs from the main ones?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the themes are very similar, girlhood, finding your inner voice, female strength, survival. I apparently just like write about the same things again and done. The setting and the how, the who, the what's very different. In fact, the Me ones was very fun to write, yes, but it was much more real and like emotionally exhausted. But I was done with it. I was like, I need an escapism look. And so What Feeds Below is a YA horror fantasy. It's very much inspired by anime. I was thinking about the world building of Made in Abyss, the gritty bodied horror of Attack on Titan. I was also thinking about films like The Descent and Annihilation.
Okay.
And so the premise is we have two teen girls who give tours to rich tourists in this great chasm in the world that's full of monsters and treasure, and a Joppa frog, and they're trapped. And it's a cave that has fungal horror. So like The Descent meets my Annihilation.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to read this one. That's going to be so much fun. How amazing. Well, okay, hold on, pause. I also wanted to talk about the artwork because I know the artwork in your books is just amazing, like the cover. And so I remember we talked about this on the last interview, but do you have the same people do this artwork as well?
It's actually a different artist, but we wanted to do similar vibes, so it feels like my brand.
Absolutely, and it does. It for sure does.
I picked out the artist. Her handle's Crumbs and Gubs on Instagram. And yeah, she is amazing. The cover we have this bright pink font. We have the woman with the antlers growing out prize, and then the fingers got up the antlers, which is just direct imagery from the book. And we like this head splitting down the middle as to sort of represent, Satan's normal and not normal self pulling at her, the real world, the other place, the past, the present. It feels like there's a lot of layers to that. And then we went with the pink since, this is the feminist horror book.
Yeah.
We have strong things of girlhood and womanhood.
I think that cover captures everything about the book, and I think it is so it's so like creepy and beautiful, and it's very captivating, and I love the pink touch to it too because it is girl power. So yeah, both of you, all the art covers or the covers for your book so far. So I'm excited to see what your next one looks like too. Have you already been starting like working on it, and looking at it and stuff?
Yeah, we've been doing the early sketches. Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
So excited. Well, I have one more question for you, and then I want you to tell us where everyone can find you, okay? But this one is so finally for listeners who are aspiring writers, what advice would you give them when writing horror that delves into darker aspects of human psychology?
It can be tricky. I personally handle this by writing a lot from my own lived experience. And that helps me process, what I've been through and is within my comfort zone. But obviously with horror, we're exploring all kinds of avenues. And I've never been, under threat murder before. So I'm reading and consuming all writing broadly, I think helps. I turn to other forms too, like movies, video games. I feel that those elicit other and new horror feelings that I pull into my writing. And then writing community. I would not be here like where I am in my career if I didn't have my writing friends. And so I need those people to bounce ideas back off of. And yeah.
And where do you find your writing community?
Yeah, I found mine online, just like from Googling writing groups. And so I met mine during COVID. And since that, I've just been connecting with writers on Instagram, on Reddit. And I find that if you just like put it out there that you're looking for other writers to connect with,
Yeah.
the community is pretty open and receptive.
Amazing. I love that. And I love finding that community that you can just all sit there and support each other and hype each other up and, you know, give good criticism, give good feedback and stuff that will help you grow as a writer. So that's amazing. Well, Tatiana, I'm so glad you came here today to talk about this book. I would love for you to tell the listeners anything else that you would want them to know and where they can find you and where they can get this book and anything else you want them to know.
Yeah. Support your local library. And you can find me on social media at The Buff Writer on pretty much all social medias.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on to Dragons and Spaceships again and talking with me. It was lovely chatting with you again. I can't wait for our listeners to find this book and read it and let us know what they think. And I'm going to give a little bit of a brief overview about it too. And I'm just so excited for the success that you're having. And I hope it's just continuing on into this next book that you have as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on, Tatiana. It's good to talk to you.